Welcome to this deep dive explainer. Today, we're taking a close look at a didactic guide that honestly, fundamentally shifts how we think about teaching and student engagement. So if you're an educator, I want you to take a second and just step back. Think about your modern classroom. I want you to envision it not just as a room with desks and a whiteboard, but as a high-stakes flight simulator for the real world. Seriously. We're unpacking the guidelines from Brazil's National Common Curricular Base, you know it as the BNCC, and we're going to explore how active methodologies can absolutely transform your students from passive listeners into highly capable, real-world problem solvers. Okay, let's dive right into this. Today, we're going to cover 5 key areas. First, the foundation of education, then technical reports and practice. After that, we'll look at the power of comparative studies, followed by debates and nonviolent communication, and finally, we'll wrap up with theater, literature, and protagonism. All right, starting things off with Section 1, the foundation of education. To start, we really need to look at the architect's blueprint. The core philosophy here is a massive paradigm shift. Education isn't just about memorizing abstract theory from a chalkboard anymore. It's fundamentally about mobilizing knowledge in real time to overcome tangible, actual challenges. And this brings us straight to the BNCC's core definition of competency. They define it as the active and integrated mobilization of knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes to solve complex problems in society and the workplace. Now, what's genuinely fascinating about this concept is how it completely redefines learning. It pushes us far, far away from passive absorption and demands active, real-world execution. Because, competency doesn't just mean knowing what a tool is. It means knowing exactly when, why, and how to use it when a totally unpredictable challenge pops up in your community or your career. So how do we actually build these competencies? Well, mostly through project-based learning, especially within vocational and technical education. Think about it. When you have your students run a project, you aren't just giving them homework. You're creating a true simulator for their future careers. They're simulating the work environment, they're developing tangible technical competencies, but crucially, they connect their daily academic learning to their own life project, their personal long-term goals. This whole approach allows you as the educator to contextualize and flex the curriculum to fit your local reality, all while fostering a really strong entrepreneurial mindset. Just imagine your students actively managing tasks, negotiating deadlines, and solving bottlenecks exactly like they would in a modern corporate office. It's pretty amazing. Moving right along to Section 2, technical reports in practice. We're transitioning now from that foundational theory into our first specific pedagogical laboratory. And that is teaching students how to structure professional technical reports. Because let's face it, when students step into the workplace, they aren't going to be asked to write standard school essays, right? They'll be writing data-driven reports. Our source document outlines a really standardized evaluation structure to practice exactly this: contextualization, methodology, critical analysis, and essential recommendations. Using this formal, rigid framework in your classroom bridges the gap between those basic academic exercises and actual corporate reality. It literally forces students to be objective, highly analytical, and above all, actionable in their writing. Let's look at how this works in a real scenario pulled straight from the source material. This is a case study diagnosis of a school broadcasting channel called TVE Tech. Now, instead of a student just casually saying, "Hey, the video isn't great," they are taught to rigorously categorize the content, assess the technical quality, noting things like varying audio, lighting issues, and basic editing, and then provide concrete strategic recommendations. So they're suggesting things like technical training, creating a visual guide, implementing SEO, and acquiring new equipment. A structured diagnosis like this translates dense, everyday observations into actionable professional feedback. It is an absolute game changer for developing their critical thinking. Which brings us to Section 3, the power of comparative studies. This is where we focus on building deeply analytical, scientific minds that can actually see the big picture. Confronting different realities is absolutely key here. The goals of comparative research are pretty clear. If a student only ever looks at a single isolated case, they're going to completely miss the complex nuances of the wider world. But by comparing two systems, let's say educational policies in 2 different countries, or even 2 competing tech companies, they learn to identify similarities and differences. They start to understand root causes and those cascading consequences. They generate fresh insights and formulate truly robust theories. Ultimately, this level of analytical rigor is exactly what subsidizes high-level policymaking and strategic decision-making out there in the real world. Guiding students through a rigorous, scientific, comparative analysis requires a really clear 6-step journey. You start by simply defining the elements. Then you identify the specific variables you're testing, collect your data, analyze that data meticulously, compare the results head-to-head, and finally, interpret the findings to formulate conclusions. It's methodical, it's repeatable, and it fundamentally trains the brain to process information like a true researcher rather than just a passive observer. Next up, Section 4, Debates and Nonviolent Communication. Now, let's shift gears for a second to the profoundly human element. We're treating the debate stage as the ultimate simulator for leadership, negotiation, and empathy in the corporate world. Because debating in class isn't just about winning an argument or, speaking the loudest. It's a highly structured exercise that hits core BNCC mandates directly. It hits Competency 4 by forcing clear communication and information sharing. It activates Competency 7, demanding that argumentation be grounded strictly in reliable facts, data, and ethics. And perhaps most importantly, it develops Competency 9, empathy, cooperation, and conflict resolution. The ability to argue your point fundamentally while maintaining a deep respect for divergence is exactly what creates effective leaders. Our source material really emphasizes this. It says that in school debates, the adoption of nonviolent communication is crucial, so that the clash of ideas remains focused on technical arguments, promoting constructive dialogues, rather than descending into personal attacks. So, the crucial point here is that technical brilliance just isn't enough on its own. Technical arguments must always be paired with nonviolent, empathetic communication. That is the secret formula. It's how you truly prepare your students for healthy, productive interactions in both democratic societies and high-pressure professional environments. And finally, we arrive at Section 5, Theater, Literature, and Protagonism. This is where active methodology and artistic expression literally collide to bring static literature bursting into vibrant life. There's a really powerful duality here. On one side, we have the machinery of active methodology, placing the student squarely as the protagonist, executing a project from start to finish, sparking out-of-the-box creativity, and building major socio-emotional skills like resilience and teamwork. Then, on the other side, we have the literature foundation, acting as the fuel, providing deep inspiration, forcing intense textual comprehension, expanding vocabulary, and giving students really complex social themes to chew on. Hands-on theatrical creation perfectly complements and elevates those foundational academic texts. It makes learning something you can actually feel and experience. And for anyone who worries that theater in the classroom is just playtime, well, consider the rigor involved here. This highly creative endeavor strictly checks off specific BNCC curriculum requirements, like EF15 AR18 for appreciating theatrical forms, EF15 AR21 for exercising improvisation and stepping into another's shoes through empathy, and EF69 AR26 for diving into the technical aspects of scenic composition, like costumes, sound, and lighting. It keeps students deeply, passionately engaged in their own learning journey, all while thoroughly hitting those mandatory academic benchmarks. Which brings us to the end of our explainer today, and honestly, leaves me with a very important question for you. Which of these active methodologies are you going to implement in your next lesson plan? Whether it's project-based learning, structuring technical reports, conducting comparative research, hosting empathetic debates, or bringing text to life through theater, the tools are right here in your hands. You've got the blueprint. Now it's time to go build those real-world flight simulators in your own classrooms. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I absolutely can't wait to see how you transform your teaching.